In the last module, we overviewed background knowledge about U.S. citizenship and different types of immigrant statuses. In this module, we will learn why it's important for educators to be knowledgeable about U.S. citizenship. Throughout this module, you will develop an understanding about U.S. citizenship policies and procedures so that you can be a better resource, advocate, and ally for students and families. While this course will build your foundational knowledge of U.S. citizenship, we want to emphasize that an educator's role is not to be an expert in immigration. On completion of this module, you will be able to explain how educators can be a resource for students and families attempting to find reliable information regarding citizenship, particularly information on the naturalization process. You will be able to distinguish foundational knowledge from specialized expertise while remaining an ally and advocate for students and families. You will also learn about educational resources that can help you support students preparing for the naturalization test, as well as be equipped to share these resources with students' families and other colleagues. Educators should be knowledgeable about U.S. citizenship for several reasons, but we will focus on the following interrelated concepts: exposure, trust, access, and expertise. School educators are often the very first person or point of contact for newly arrived students and their families when they come to the United States. This initial contact with students and subsequent frequent exposure once students are enrolled in schools allows immigrant youth and their families to develop trusting relationships with their teachers over time. Students often confide in educators about their immigration statuses or share vulnerable information about their families with the school. As such, educators serve the vital role of being a trusted resource of information with the ability to connect immigrant students and families with reliable immigration experts or community organizations. As a reminder, educators with foundational knowledge are not specialists in the immigration process, but they can provide advocacy and reliable resources for students and families. From an academic standpoint, educators are in a unique position to access materials and plan instruction to actively promote citizenship within their classrooms and within the school community. It is often through teachers that immigrant youth gain access to the civics and English language learning content they require to be prepared for the naturalization test. Research indicates that once immigrant youth separate from school settings, it's difficult to reconnect them with trusted resources that can pave the way to U.S. citizenship. Therefore, during the window in which educators who have built a trusting relationship with immigrant students have regular access to these students in the classroom, they are in the prime position to support immigrant youth and their families in the pursuit of U.S. citizenship. It is very important to know that educators cannot ask students or families about their immigration status, deny students access to school based on immigration status, or share personal information, such as immigration status, with others. The American Federation of Teachers produced a fact sheet in 2017 explaining the 1982 U.S. Supreme Court case Plyler v. Doe ruled that undocumented students have a constitutional right to receive a free public K-12 education. All students, regardless of their citizenship or residency status, are entitled to attend school. School districts that either prohibit or discourage students from enrolling in schools because they or their parents are undocumented immigrants may be in violation of federal law and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Schools cannot bar a student from enrolling because the student lacks a birth certificate or social security number or has a record that indicates a foreign place of birth. Additionally, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, commonly known as FERPA, prohibits schools from sharing students' educational records, including records of immigration status, except in unusual circumstances or with written consent. However, because educators are a person of trust for students and families, immigrant youth might confide in an educator about their immigration status without being asked. If a student shares information about their immigration status with you unprompted, it's important that you provide them with resources they and their families can use on their own rather than attempt to serve as legal counsel. It's also important to keep in mind that you must never share the information you have been given with others without the student's consent. Educators can provide both instructional and social-emotional support to students and their families. In Module 4, we will review the naturalization process, which for citizenship applicants typically entails taking an English and civics test as part of the interview they must complete with a USCIS officer. To help applicants prepare for these experiences, educators can build students' foundational knowledge on key concepts of U.S. history and civics by discussing core concepts such as the Bill of Rights, the branches of U.S. government, and the importance of civic duty. For example, teachers of students considering applying for naturalization might structure lessons around fundamental rights and responsibilities of U.S. citizenship, like voting in federal elections. Educators can also provide explicit opportunities for students to develop written and oral English language proficiency to prepare students for the naturalization test and interview. It's also important for educators to ensure that students and their families are aware of the rights and benefits of everyone living in the United States, regardless of immigration status. For example, both citizens and non-citizens living in this country are promised freedom of worship and freedom of speech by the Constitution. When educators consciously choose to discuss these types of benefits within the classroom and school community, citizens and non-citizens alike are better equipped to act on their legal rights and to participate in local events. All students can feel that their culture is honored within the school setting, and a sense of connectedness among members of the larger school community is strengthened as everyone is made to feel recognized and included regardless of citizenship status. The USCIS website, which we will review in greater detail in Module 5, has a plethora of educator resources, such as study guides and practice tests, that can be used to prepare students for the naturalization test. The Reliable Resources handout also includes a section labeled Resources for Educators, where sample materials are hyperlinked. Building awareness and empathy for the challenges non-U.S. citizens face is crucial for educators. Immigrants without citizenship have limited legal protections, making them vulnerable and less likely to report being a victim of a crime or being treated unethically as a tenant or employee. They may be afraid to alert authorities of such treatment because of fluctuations in immigration enforcement policies or limited access to employment, which creates economic hardships. Language and cultural barriers can prevent immigrants from accessing resources like medical care and reliable immigration counsel. Non-citizens who have limited English proficiency and lack access to trusted resources can face significantly difficulty navigating visa, green card, and naturalization processes and forms. Educators should recognize the social and emotional struggles immigrant students and families face, which can impact their participation in school-sponsored activities and meetings, or can cause emotional distress in students. For example, non-citizens cannot travel as freely as citizens can, which sometimes results in social isolation and separation from family. Feelings of homesickness or isolation can have a significant impact on the well-being of immigrant youth. Despite the many benefits of U.S. citizenship, it's also important to be aware that personal concerns, such as the inability to hold dual citizenship in one's home country and in the U.S., might lead someone who is eligible for naturalization to decide against applying. Considerations of this type, as well as many of the vulnerabilities and challenges that impact immigrants of all backgrounds, are often not immediately apparent to U.S. citizens by birth. It is essential for educators to inform themselves on concerns that impact their community across immigration statuses in order to be an empathetic and effective supportive resource. While encouraging immigrant families to pursue U.S. citizenship when possible, educators should be aware that not everyone in their community may be eligible for naturalization, and that of those eligible, naturalization might not be ideal in every case. Immigrants' concerns and qualms about naturalization should not be dismissed offhand. Instead, educators are uniquely placed to offer a sympathetic ear and to point people with questions about U.S. citizenship towards official resources that can provide definitive answers. As mentioned earlier, in most cases, a non-citizen must be a lawful permanent resident for at least 5 years to apply for naturalization. In the case of some residents married to U.S. citizens, the period for which they must hold a green card before naturalizing is 3 years, a situation that is unlikely to apply to younger students, but which may be relevant to family members. While the overall process from being a green card holder to becoming a U.S. citizen can be lengthy, as shown here, an average of 7 years, once the application for naturalization is submitted, the processing time can be quite fast. It's important to encourage your students and members of their families who wish to obtain the benefits of U.S. citizenship to submit their applications as soon as they are eligible. Now is a good time for you to review educational resources on the USCIS website that you can use to prepare students for the naturalization test in English and civics. Educational materials designed for these purposes are available in many different formats, such as interactive practice tests, podcasts, and videos. There are also downloadable lesson plans, some of which are differentiated by English proficiency level. It's recommended that those who would like to get a more detailed sense of what to expect at the naturalization interview watch the USCIS's 4-part video series on the topic and use the contents of that video to practice at home. The top right corner of this slide has a screenshot of one of the test study materials developed by USCIS. You will see that it includes background knowledge about U.S. history, as well as opportunities to practice key English language skills. Practice with ordinal numbers, simple past tense forms, and dates, for example, is provided in a civics-specific context, giving students the chance to brush up on reading, writing, and U.S. history knowledge simultaneously. Integrating the study of U.S. civics and the English language whenever possible, as demonstrated in this example, is highly recommended when working with immigrant students and their families. We highly encourage you to explore the free learning resources prepared by the USCIS that bring together the study of civics and the study of the English language so that you can share these materials as relevant with colleagues and students' families. In this module, we have overviewed why educators should be knowledgeable about U.S. citizenship. We've talked about how teachers fill the role of trusted resource and point of reference for people seeking answers to immigration questions. But we have emphasized that educators are not experts in immigration policy and should not represent themselves as such. We have also discussed how educators can support immigrant students and families by pointing them towards reliable instructional materials as they prepare for the naturalization interview. To self-check your learning, please complete the comprehension questions found directly below this video.